Welcome everybody to Wisdom Blogs. My name is Liza Collins, and this week I'm joined by a very special guest, Bridget Finklaire. I met Bridget probably, 14 years ago, as we were both on our spiritual development journeys. And I was really keen to get Bridget on here today to talk about her life experience, because she's somebody that's always inspired me in terms of the way that you have just decided what you're going to do and then do it. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But just to give everybody a bit of a background of who you are, Bridget is an author and a spiritual teacher. She's a qualified psychotherapist and a hypnotherapist, and spent over 25 years in spiritual development and worked for 18 years as a therapist, 3 of which were in Harley Street, where you had a very successful practice. You created the Bone Circle in 2018, designed to help people understand who they are, what they've come here to do, and how to create what they love. And that's the amalgamation of all the juicy bits that you've gathered over the years in your experience. And you've recently written a book called Red Dress, which is your debut novel and is going to be published this year. And I've been lucky enough to read the first 3 chapters, which you've already got me hooked. I can't wait to read the whole book and then the 2 books to follow afterwards. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm really so happy that you're here, because I haven't seen you since 2012.
That's right. I just want to say thank you for inviting me on here. And it's just such a pleasure to see you, Liza, and see you shine in the world and see you doing what you're here to do. So it's beautiful. It's a celebration, really, isn't it? And it's been a long time since I saw you. 2012, in the summer, I think, down in the West Country was the last time I saw you.
And I kind of, in a way, I guess my question starts from there, because the last time I saw you, we were at an event, we were at a spiritual event, and you told me, I've got this feeling I need to go to South Africa. So I'm just going to pack my bags and go. And 9 years later, here you are in South Africa. You've built your own house. You have a successful business. You've got married. And it's like, how did you do that? You know, the confidence, the drive. So that's kind of what I want to get into. You know, what's the wisdom that you have from your experience that you can share with others to help inspire them to do some of the little bits that you've done?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? It's actually, it's one of those ones that's kind of easy and hard all at the same time. You know, like when people say, well, how do you meditate? Well, actually, all you do is sit there and breathe, and you go, oh, that's dead easy. And you try and do that. And of course, it's not like that. Your mind goes. And so it's a little bit like that. I think in my life, there's some things that I'm a complete wuss about. You know, I won't go swimming in the cold sea in Cape Town, and I won't go, you know, paragliding and things like that. I'm not at all a courageous person. But when it comes to life path, I suppose, and going for things, I think I've grown more courageous over time. But I think the crux of it is knowing if it's true for you or not. If you know that something is true for you, you don't mind taking the leap of faith. If you think that you might just be screwing up your life, you're not going to do it. And that's really, I think, the crux of it is when I said, well, I might be going to Africa, I think I'm going to go to Africa. I had an intuitive knowing that I was probably going to come to Africa, but I kind of talk about your small self and your greater self, and your small self always panics. So the greater self is going, you need to go to Africa, and the small self is going, don't be ridiculous. So there's always this constant battle between your greater self and your small self, and it's extremely difficult, I think, for people to know, well, what's actually true? Am I making a tremendous mistake in my life that could really take me off the rails, or is this an inspired and wonderful leap forward? And actually that really boils down to the essence of the Bone Circle training. I did do a training in England in 2012, which was a training in my intuition. So it was to be able to tap in at will to your intuition. Now, we've all got intuition, we've all got it, but we're all kind of conditioned to not listen to it. Because have you ever done that where you're driving to work or something, or you're driving somewhere familiar and you get the little voice in your head that goes, turn right. And you say, don't be daft, that's the long way round, I'll be late for work, I'm going to go straight on. So you ignore it, and you go straight on, and you hit a roadblock because there's been an accident, you're stuck there now for 20 minutes, you think, why didn't I just do? And that's how your intuition works. So your intuition is the very first thing that your mind apprehends, the very first thing you get before your rational mind and your smaller self kick in to tell you rationally why you shouldn't do that. And in fact, I was just talking to a friend of mine who sent me this voice message. Bridget, can you just answer this question? My friend's from town and she wants me to go and do this thing with her this weekend. And my first initial instinct was, oh no, I'm too tired. But then I love my friend and I should go. I said, your first initial instinct is right. You're too tired to do it. But I love my friend. Yeah, that's your small self going, but I love my friend. I don't want to let her down. I need to spend the time. But the truth is you're knackered and, you know, see her another time. So that's the first thing, I think, is knowing what your truth is. So within, so the training that I did, and now the training that I train, which is sort of like that with brass knobs on, because it's brought in a whole load of therapy stuff and a whole load of spiritual stuff, is really to be able to tap in at will to your intuition. Because normally intuition happens, it comes from nowhere, and you don't know when it's coming in and when it's not, and you can't normally get into it at will, you know. And it comes when you're in the shower or walking the dog, or, you know, I don't know, sitting at the traffic lights. It's normally when you're not thinking, you're washing up or something, or you're in the garden, or you're going for a walk. That's when you suddenly get ideas and your intuition comes in. And you need to capture those, because often by the time you've got home, or by the time you've got into something else, you go, oh, I'll do that this evening, I'll write it down. By the evening, you'll have forgotten it. So you need to kind of start to take notice of what happens when you're not really thinking. When you're thinking about something else, like driving or having a shower, and you're not really thinking about anything, and stuff comes in. Also, first thing in the morning, things can often come in. If you've been gone to bed and you kind of thought, well, I really want to start a business, but I don't know what it is. In the morning, you might suddenly have an idea, and you need to capture that before the little self goes, oh, but you can't do that. You don't know anything about that. That's going to cost you too much money, and all the rest of it, you see. So that's where it starts, is being able to tap in at will with your intuition to your greater self. So the way that I look at it is, your greater self encompasses the pure spiritual creative you that came here before you were born, that's maybe had many incarnations, that's also inclusive of your soul and your spirit. It's probably connected to everything, and it's wise, and it carries all of your gifts and talents, even if you don't think you've got them. And the small self is the one that keeps you safe. And it's the small self that's been conditioned in childhood, and it's sort of like, no, we're going to be careful about that. Oh no, you can't do this, and no, you can't do that. And you've got to please people, and you've got to fit in, and you've got to do things the right way. And I'm not good enough, and I'm not worthy of that, and I'm not powerful enough, and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a silly little girl who doesn't know anything. That's one of my ones. And you've got to overcome that conditioned response. And go for what your greatness is telling you, your greater self is telling you. No, this is what you're here to do. This is what you would love. This is what's fulfilling. Go for it. Yeah, so it's about tapping in intuitively to that greater self, which will give you the ideas, the inspiration, and the direction. That, I can probably teach people that in a day. Yeah. It's quite easy to do that, but what's hard to do is to overcome the resistance. So in a way, you know, people think, oh, that's amazing, you know, she's just gone off to Africa. It's not quite as simple as that. There was a lot of tapping into my intuition with that. And there was a lot of wrestling with my smaller self, saying, what do you think you're doing? I mean, the 2 weeks before leaving London to come to South Africa, by then I'd resigned from my job in Harley Street. That alone was quite hard. You spend your life building up a career, and you get to the top of it in Harley Street, and there you are working full-time in Harley Street with a waiting list, and somebody goes, resign, and you think, what? That's all I know. What are you talking about? So there's that. And so I'd done that. And then I had a beautiful flat in South London, and you know, that now I'm being called to get rid of stuff that I've had for years and rent that place out. And you think, well, this is my house. I don't know if I want to rent this out. So there's all these resistances. And towards the end, my children had gone off to university, and I was left to kind of, you know, sift through stuff and get rid of things. And at first you're doing it really carefully. Well, I'll give that to so-and-so. And, you know, my sister-in-law can have this, and my brother can have that. My kid can have this. And I'll give that to the charity shop, and I'll keep this. And then towards the end, it's just frantic, because you're going to go to South Africa and you've got 2 weeks and you've still got too much stuff. So it's frantic bootloads of stuff going to the dump, you know, and then you throw away. I threw away books I wanted to keep, really, like recipe books. And then I kept like posh clothes, you know, London clothes. And I live in a seaside town now, and I never wear them, and I've got put on weight and I'm older now anyway. But there was immense panic. I mean, my heart was in my throat. There were times when I was just like, whoa, what am I doing? I'm throwing my life away. I'm completely ruining my life here. And so I think it's true that as you've got to somehow test. I had to test this stuff. I had to road test it. I had to say, does this work? Does it work to listen to your intuition, to follow what your greater self is saying, and to ignore what every fiber in your being is shouting at you to do? Does that work, or is it going to be awful? And I kind of thought, in the end, I don't really have that much to lose. I've now resigned from Harley Street. I can rent out my flat, and that gives me money. And if it all goes pear-shaped, I can travel around the world for a year, or I can go and rent a very small one-bedroom flat somewhere outside London, and I can still, you know, I'll be fine. So I had a bit of reassurance, but I think it's really important to know that it's not that you're going to be completely confident and completely courageous as you go off on your adventure. No, you're going to feel fear, and it's that feel the fear and do it anyway. So it's that being brave and afraid at the same time. So you know, I just I'm going to go to South Africa. It feels very scary. At times I'm terrified, but I'm not going to let that fear stop me. I'm going to go. And then of course it did all work out. So
yeah, and it reminds me as well as when we went to Spain for a year, and as you're talking, I remember going through the exact same feeling. You know, we left jobs, we had sold our house, we took the kids out of school, and every time we were unhooking from something, you're absolutely right, there's something inside you that's saying, you've got to try this. And we kept coming back to, what's the worst thing that can happen? You know, we'll just come back and do it, you know, set up again. And, you know, on our deathbed, we're not going to regret this. That was the one mantra that kept pulling us through. But I absolutely remember those feelings of excitement, but terror, and absolutely feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
It's a roller coaster, isn't it? It's a real roller coaster. But I think it's like he who dares wins, and the universe applauds action. And I think one of the things you said there, which is really important, which is something I try to do with my clients and with the Bone Circle, is very often there's a fear we've all got fears, and often there's an underlying fear that actually stops you doing things. And if you actually face that fear rather than try and run away from it, it's incredibly empowering. So you face it and you go, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Oh, well, you know, it won't work out. Okay, well, you know, so what? Because what I don't want to do is get to 90 and be in the same life and thinking, well, I could have gone and lived in South Africa, you know, or I could have done this, or could have gone bungee jumping. I could have gone to live in Spain. I could have run my own business. Whatever it is, I could have written a book. Lots of people go, oh, I'd love to write a book. Just write it. You know, I'd love to learn to play piano. Just do it. Just do it. We know what we love.
And I remember when we got back from Spain, I did a blog when I was out in Spain, and there was a beautiful quote that I saw, and I can't remember where it came from, but it was, our gifts are on the other side of our fears. And I put that in the blog. And again, as you're speaking, I'm seeing the truth of that, because you're right. When you face your fears, and in a way, they're like paper tigers because they feel huge. But the moment you stop and you look at them, they just fizzle away. And, you know, the gifts are on the other side, because you're now living in South Africa. You know, you are you've written your first book, and you could still be in London thinking, I had an inkling of doing that years ago, and I wonder what that would have looked like. And I wonder, you know, when we reflect over our own lives, how many of those moments of inspiration have come up over the decades that we didn't follow, that if we had an opportunity to look at where all those little paths would have taken us, you know, how different our lives would be now. I guess that's kind of an interesting thing to sort of reflect on. But I guess, you know, the proof is what we have around us now anyway, isn't it, of the paths that we did follow. And what I love about what you've done is that you've followed that intuition, like you say, and, you know, and you're kind of benefiting now from pushing through those fears. And just going back to what you said at the beginning about the intuition, because for so many years I would always struggle with what's the intuition and what's the small self, because I couldn't distinguish between the voices, and the intuition always seemed to be a bit quieter. And I've now realized over the years that my intuition tends to come in when I'm around water. And I don't know whether that's just because it's a bit more, conductivity around water, but there's definitely around water. I always get amazing ideas if I'm in the shower or the bath, or if I go for a walk down by the river. And that's when it tends to pop in. And I now pay attention to that. But it's taken me a long, long time. I didn't have a teacher like you to kind of go and have that conversation. And I guess I was always looking for that confirmation of the intuition. But I eventually got there myself, and I recognized that's what they are. So it's lovely to hear you speak about it, because again, it's given me another validation and confirmation of what I discovered.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you about the water. There's a conductivity about it, and the shower, the bath, and I walk by the ocean here, and it's very inspiring. So I totally agree with you. And then the other thing about your magic, everything being on the other side of fear. There's another one that all the magic happens outside your comfort zone.
Yes.
And people try to stay in their comfort zone, and that means you've got to step out of your comfort zone. And guess what? That means you're going to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But when you do that, you're stretching yourself. And then I also want to go back to what you said about, if we'd followed those intuitive hits all the way along, how different would our lives have been? But I think we have to mature, because I think that in, our early adulthood, we're very deeply conditioned by our upbringing, for good or bad. There's not a judgment there. We're just deeply conditioned by our culture, the time we grew up in, the area we grew up in, the neighbors, the teachers, mum and dad, siblings, all kinds of things condition us. And we're living within that conditioning. And in a way, that's being asleep, isn't it? But I think as time rolls forward, we begin to maybe question some of that conditioning and go, hang on a minute, you spoke earlier on the email about living in Turnham Green, and now you kind of go, no, that wasn't me, and I didn't need to do that. And so we begin to learn to understand who we are rather than who we are expected to be.
Absolutely.
Or who we are conditioned to be. And so I think as we grow older, we go on any kind of personal development or spiritual development or therapy work or anything that's self-examining. I mean, that axiom, know thyself, is most powerful kind of spiritual axiom there is. Know thyself. And for me, that's know your greater self and your small self. But you get to know yourself. And I think that's when you start questioning things, and that opens something in the mind. And it's not until you get older that you start to listen to that small voice. And you're right, it is a small voice that can easily get trampled over. And I think for me, intuition is very clear. It's always got a ring of truth, and it has a clarity. It's a simplicity and a clarity. It's just like, oh, I know, I'll interview Bridget. And it's just like, okay, I'll just contact her, and you do it. And it flows. Whereas the smaller self, things tend to get cloudy and uncertainty starts to come in. The funny thing about intuition, sometimes it can tell you something scary, like you're going to move to Spain or you're going to move to South Africa. It can be scary, but it's still clear and it still rings true, even though it's scary. Whereas the smaller self can often, you go into analysis paralysis, because it can tell you, it goes through all the reasons and whys and arguments and evidence and all of these sorts of things, which then create confusion. And then you don't know where you are. So if you're in confusion, you've probably got into the smaller self. Yeah. If you're in clarity, you're probably in your greater self. And if you're in clarity and you're a little bit scared and your heart's going like that, you're probably on the right road.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's interesting what you said about the comfort zone, because I remember as well reading something about, nothing ever grows inside a comfort zone. It stagnates. And I thought that was another profound thing as well, because you're right, the magic is outside of it, because the comfort zone is keeping you safe, it's keeping you small. There's no room for growth, is there? There's no room for challenge and adventure. And the one thing that I've discovered over my life is to get familiar with that feeling uncomfortable. And when we did that year away from, when we traveled and lived in Spain, we came back and we just felt invincible. And it's so easy to fall back then into the small self and the conditioning. And we find now we're breaking out of that again. So, we look back over our lives, the times that we've done this, we also lived in Australia for a couple of years and had the same fears then. So it always feels like it's a never ending unfoldment and story of facing those fears. And I guess that's true, because we're always expanding and we're always growing and we're always moving into those uncertain stretchy bits.
Absolutely. And I love that thing, unfoldment. I would say everything is an unfoldment. And so, yeah, I think what happens is you go for something, it's frightening, and you go for it and you grow. You actually grow as a result of that, because you become stronger. As you said, you become invincible, but you do creep back into that condition because that's what society expects of you, and you kind of fit back into it. And then I think you get to a point where you go, no, I've had enough of this. There must be more to life than this. And so that's when you go, okay, look, we did this, now we can do something else. And as you say, every time you go for something else, you're stretching your comfort zone, and you're stretching yourself, and you're learning. And the way that I talk about that within the training is we refer back to Joseph Campbell's work. So Joseph Campbell, I don't know if you know Campbell. So he discovered the hero's journey. He used to teach myth, and he discovered the hero's journey. If you look at the hero's journey, it's in most like blockbuster films or the hero's journey is there, but our lives can also be a hero's journey. And that hero's journey, it starts at the top, and then you go around and you come back. But what I teach is it's not a circle. You don't come back to where you were. You actually, if you look at it from the side, you're not coming like this, you're going up. So you're actually spiraling. So every time you go on a hero's journey, which is really any time you decide to do anything that's outside of your comfort zone, or go for something that's true for you, that's a bit scary, or go for something that's intuitive, that your greater self wants you to do, every single one you do, whether it's going to Spain or going to Australia or starting up a wisdom blog or writing a book, everything you do is a hero's journey. And you're stepping out of that ordinary world into that magical world, really. I mean, Harry Potter's a classic hero's journey, and I love it. My daughter, who's a screenwriter, she reads Harry Potter over and over. I read them to her when she was a kid, and she reads them over and over because she says there's so much that you can learn about life in Harry Potter, because it's the hero's journey. And you see how things just lead. Often Harry Potter, he doesn't have a plan, does he? He doesn't really know what he's doing. He just knows he's got to go. And he's got a kind of a vague plan. And then Hermione comes in and helps him. And then, he gets hold of something, like somebody gives him an invisibility cloak, and then something else happens. And actually, that's how living this way, living life on purpose, that's how it happens. You don't actually know all the steps between where I am now and when I'm going to be. You just know you've got to go, and it's a little bit like a sat nav in your car. It doesn't tell you every single turning between wherever you are and wherever you're going to go. It says go to the bottom of the road and turn right, and then you've turned right, and then it gives you the next thing over the roundabout or whatever. And when you start living your life like that, it allows all kinds of magical things to come in, and magical experiences and growth, because you're not trying to control it all. You're not trying to plan it all. You haven't. People think they've got to have their goal, and they've got to have all the steps towards that goal, and just get that, they've got to do X and Y and Z, and they've got it all mapped out. And they'll get to their goal, but they'll also exhaust themselves, and they don't leave any time for any serendipity or any magic or any wonderful things to happen. And so it's really nice to I call it a vision rather than the goal, to have a vision of what you want, and take the first inspired step towards that, knowing that the next step will be given you when you get there. So I'm sure that's the same when you went to Spain. You don't have to know exactly what part of Spain I'm going to be in, exactly what house I'm going to live in, and how long I'm going to be there, and what I'm going to do when I get there. You just need to know, we're going to Spain, and this is a rough area we're going, and we'll find something. And as things unfold, it all.
Yeah, and I love that as well, that description. And you're absolutely right, because we didn't even know we were going to go to Spain. We literally had planned to go to Canada. My mum got really ill, so we had to change our plans. And we said, you know what, let's just go to Europe and see what happens. So we literally got in the car on a September rainy morning with the kids, couple of bags, drove over to France. And we knew we were going to go and see a friend, Sophie. So we drove to see her. Then we'd gone and booked 2 weeks. And then we just literally every week we thought, let's go there. And then we eventually found ourselves in northern Spain. Called a friend who said, I'm in southern Spain, come and visit. Within 2 weeks, we found a villa, and we lived there for 7 months. It all just unfolded, like you say, absolutely perfectly. And I love that word serendipity, because for me, that was serendipity in, we were living it rather than just talking about what that could look like. And there was that unfoldment, and it was scary, and we didn't know where we were going to be a couple of days from now, but we'd look at the map and we'd say, oh, let's go and have a look over there, and we'd find accommodation. And, you know, and doing it with children was interesting and they adapted really well, because, you know, when you do it on your own or just with a couple, it's scary, but doing it with children and trying to keep all that together was very, very, very tricky and scary, but they adapted beautifully. If there's one thing that you'd like to share before we wrap up, what is a golden nugget that you'd like to share with somebody in terms of, you know, the biggest heart wisdom that you have, that you always offer out?
Oh, that's a really difficult one, because there's so many things I offer, but it'd be interesting because you said heart wisdom, and that just made me think, follow your heart.
Yeah.
Really follow your heart, not your mind.
Yes.
Your mind can trip you up, but your heart is always true. So if you open your heart and you go with what makes your heart sing, you're pretty much going to be on track, even if that's scary and you don't know how you're going to do it. Don't get into the how, don't get into the rational mind. Follow the heart, the real true heart. And there's a ring in your heart that does make your heart sing, and it makes that heart chakra open. And I think that's probably the first step. And also, I kind of think tagged with that is, it's always possible. Everything is within you that you need to do that journey. And if it's not there, it will be given to you, just like your journey to Spain. By the way, I just want to say what a fabulous experience for your children to have.
Yeah.
To see a life lived in that way. That's
absolutely. Really yeah. No, we look back now, and especially with the pandemic, I think, you know, we're so grateful we did it then, because the kids are now at an age they wouldn't do it now. But it was a real sweet spot moment that we did it at just the right time. So Thank you so much. Oh, it's been lovely speaking with you. I'm going to link all your details below if anybody wants to get in touch, and also link the book, The Red Dress. And if you like what you've heard today, please subscribe and click the notification bell to hear more wisdom blogs. And once again, thank you so much for joining me. It's been lovely speaking to you. Take care.
It's been my absolute pleasure. I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you, Lisa. Take care.